All right, everyone. Thanks so much for stopping by another live episode of Real Estate Titans, sponsored by Lion Bolt Media. I'm your host, Greg Fowler, traveling throughout the marketplace, interviewing the top professionals in our field, essentially gathering insight, inspiration, really drives and motivates these top producers above and beyond everybody else in what I'd like to consider a real estate titan. Now, a very special guest and featured titan for episode 285 from beautiful Manhattan, New York, none other than Lisa Lippman. Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
This is going to be great.
Sitting at my beautiful desk here I have Lincoln Center behind me and next to me. And it's, nice and humid here in New York. People always ask me why my skin's so good. And I tell them that it's the heat and humidity of New York City. All the, I don't know what we have in our air, but it works.
It's a beautiful thing, and I'm a fan personally. Anything on the East Coast that way, I'm a big fan. And again, just the heart of New York is just such an incredible city, an epicenter, when it comes down to it. Don't need to tell you, Lisa. And you've been at this for such a beautiful amount of time in the real estate space and really seeing it from so many different facets. I can't wait to dive into this and really help everybody know who you are, where you come from, and then what brought you to today, which is incredible, mind you. I mean, so many records and everything that you've done throughout your career thus far and continue to. I can't wait to dive into it. So let's just start with the first question. For anybody who may not know you, Lisa, who are you? What got you into the business? Where you're from? And kind of what your progression into your career and life is to today. Let's start with the origin story.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Lisa Lippman. I'm going to be 60 years old on September 28th.
Wow.
And I actually grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, but my parents were both brought up in New York, one in Queens, in Forest Hills, and one in the city and then in White Plains. And so we always had a real connection to New York City because they were both New Yorkers. And I always loved New York City. So when I was a kid, I would come in and see the Rockettes and go shopping with my dad, go out for a meal. I always had some relatives who lived here that I would visit. And then when I was in high school, my grandmother bought an apartment on Central Park West as a pied-à-terre, as a part-time home. I used to love to go visit her there. And then when I was in college at the University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia is a pretty quick train ride in. I'd go and stay at the apartment a lot. And that is when my real love of New York City developed. So when I graduated from college, I had only one idea, and that was to move to New York, which I did. I worked for a year, and then I went to law school. And I met and married my now ex-husband.
Okay.
And I worked as a lawyer, as a litigator for 5 years, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked it a lot. And then in 1994, my son, who's now 30, was born. And I tried to practice law part-time. And back then, things were a little different for women trying to work part-time. And they didn't make it as easy as they do now. I'm not to say that it's always so easy, but it was much harder back then.
Wow.
So I found it very frustrating. I wasn't getting as good in work. I was making very little money, but I was working almost full-time. So I stopped working as a lawyer. And I stayed at home, and I had another child, my middle son, who's 27. And after about a year of being at home between those two boys, I realized that being a stay-at-home mother was I was not well suited for that.
Okay.
So I decided to try to be a real estate broker. And I walked into a Corcoran office on Broadway, and I said, "Hi, I'm a lawyer and I want to do it part-time." And they said, "You're hired."
Love it.
I learned very quickly that you can't do it part-time. Back then, it probably was a little bit easier because most brokers didn't have cell phones, believe it or not. This was 1997.
Yeah.
And we weren't using the internet yet, and we weren't using email yet.
Love that.
But I started working and I really liked it. And I would say that, the next few years of my career from 97 to 2000, there were a lot of changes. First of all, the real estate market in New York really was taking off. The same time, though, email became common. Obviously, cell phones did. And my ex-husband, thinking that maybe he would get me to work less, bought me a BlackBerry. And all that did was, of course, make me work more. So I was the first broker at the Corcoran Group. I don't remember what year. I think it was 1999, who had a BlackBerry.
That's awesome.
And then of course I became very efficient.
Uh-huh.
And the rest is history. I've been doing this now for 27 years. I got divorced in 2002. I had a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. But I was financially independent and, happy in my career. And I got lucky and I met a lovely person at a bar and I married him in 2004.
Love it.
And we had another child in 2005. So now I am the mother of 3 sons who are 30, 27, and 18.
Wow.
And I've always worked, I would say, way more than full time, but it's been a flexible job. So I could go to my children's games after school. I could be at home for breakfast, at home for dinner. One of the nice things about this career as a mom is that you really don't travel. I made the choice to never sell in other cities. I'm not somebody who sells in Miami or LA. I sell in New York City. So I could be home for dinner every night and home in the morning. And here I am.
Oh my gosh, Lisa, I love the detail into that story. And again, I want to take you back to New Haven. I mean, anybody who is in the New England area and especially knows Connecticut and New Haven, pizza capital. I mean, it doesn't get better than pizza in New Haven. Like when I hear it, I think of pizza, a Beats, and I think that it's one of those things where it brings so much into the path of you going down the road as an attorney. I mean, that is an accomplishment in and of itself. And you understanding your life and your goals and positioning yourself of what was right and what was wrong. Most people say, why would you ever not do that? And why would you jump into, for all intents and purposes, a sales position into a grand scheme of things into real estate from that? And I love that you live that life and you've done it and you continue to excel at it. Being a mom and really having prioritization with career and also family is massive into that. But I mean, we're not talking about little accomplishments here, Lisa. We're talking about massive things. I mean, and please correct me if I'm wrong with these stats. I saw a recent post. Number 5 in volume and this was in 2023 in New York. Is that correct?
It's correct. And actually, not to toot my own horn, it's not really fair to even call me number 5 because 3 of the people who beat me are people who have teams of over 20, 25 people.
Not even.
So, one of the funny things about lists, and I was just at a Hollywood Reporter event last night, this guy who works for the Hollywood Reporter in Hollywood was telling me that, like, they're very into lists, right? There's lots of lists now. The problem with lists is you have to compare apples against apples and oranges against oranges. So, no sour grapes. It's fine. I'm very happy to be number 5. But the truth is that 3 of the people ahead of me on that list, terrific brokers, but they also have very, very large teams. In fact, they're so large that they're almost mini companies within the company that they work for.
That's so true. And to the professional who's tuning into this, they're going to know exactly what you're saying. They're going to say, yeah, those numbers are, you do have to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. There's no doubt. And so I'll say on paper, number 5, but in reality, number 2. And that I love all day long. And then same thing, 25 in the country. I'm sure that that's also skewed into a different way. But I mean, Lisa, this is amazing. And the idea behind this is, you've seen so much throughout your career and change and adjustment, not just to the business, but to the city and New York, being arguably one of the hardest cities to accomplish in, right? As far as high level real estate. So I want to dive a little bit into that, Lisa, in your perspective, because you've been through it. If you could kind of look back at your career thus far and pinpoint or pick or choose 1 or 2 things that you added or implemented or executed that really moved the needle for your business, that you saw serious growth, or you said, yeah, that was the path. I'm so glad that I take that. It's an advisory portion of the episode because everyone is tuning in to learn from the best and the brightest. So anything comes to mind with that question?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that I'm going to try to talk a little bit in generalities and maybe I'll try to point to some specifics. So I think, people often ask me why I've been so successful. And, obviously everybody's success is a mixture of different things. I will say that I think two of the things that have been, good for me, or three things have been that I'm a very good multitasker. Um, I'm agile, which is changing, right? Being able to pivot, morph, whatever. And I have very good memory. So what I would say, if I had to tell somebody something to implement, is that you need to be able to be agile in this business. Now, having said that, I'm not going to say I'm going to change who I am. So there are certain things that are super important to me. So, I've never been one of these people that sees myself as an actress or as a star. So there's a lot of sort of new, very successful brokers out there that do a lot on television, a lot with video. And they've always seen themselves as sort of the star of the show. Maybe some of them have come from the acting world or the modeling world. So that's sort of what they know. I always tell people when I'm going to talk to them about listing their property that I'm not the star of the show. Your property is the star of the show. So when I think about marketing, I'm going to think about marketing your property. If I have to be in a video to make it more interesting, to mix it up a little bit, I'm going to do that. But that's not what it's about.
Wow.
Because the people tuning in to see the human aren't going to be buying the property, right? And I'm also smart enough and I would say in tune enough to know that people aren't tuning in to see someone in their late 50s be on a video. Like, that's not, all I'm saying is like, that shouldn't be what it is. So that's been one of my things. But having said that, you have to be agile enough to know that video is important and social media is important. So I think there are some brokers of my generation who are so anti that whole sort of social media world that they haven't been agile enough to get involved in any of it. And I do think you need to understand where the world is. And as your buyers are aging, meaning your buyers are now in their 30s, they are people who grew up with social media. So you need to know that social media is important to them. And a lot of the people we have spending a lot of money in New York are people in their 30s. There's a ton of second generation wealth in Manhattan. And those people did grow up with social media. So maybe the 70-year-old buyers don't care, but a large portion of our buying population does care. So I think that I've been good at sort of figuring out how to stay with the times by still being true to myself.
But that in generalized terms, as you started and then got very specific, that's perfect. I mean, everybody really needs to take that to heart, is being flexible, adaptable to what is the ever-changing market. It is never stagnant. The market, the consumer, the industry in and of itself is constantly evolving and adjusting. And it's periods and waves that way. And I think that to understand what is truth to you, that is authentic to you and to your brand, but then also connecting with people in a meaningful way. This is communication, this is exposure. But I love the fact that you're really thinking consumer-centric first. And there are professionals, use the term loosely, that it is about them. And it's not really about the client or the property in and of itself. At the end of the day, it's about their spotlight. And I find that to be a little backwards. So I'm in your camp when it comes to that, Lisa. There's going to be people that are going to jump in the comments or whatever that might disagree with us. But I love the fact that you're saying this. And again, if you peel back the layers of the onion, and as much as some of these lists can be skewed, right? And we'll use Real Trends as an example. And shout out to Steve Murray. We've had him on the show. Love Steve, out of Castle Rock, Colorado, where that whole thing was founded. When we talk about those lists, a lot of the people that are putting up the numbers year after year after year and really doing volume of transactions and building that legacy, it's not about them. It is about the property. It is about the business. So again, I love that. Take that with a grain of salt as you're tuning into this. And again, learning from Lisa. Look, I mean, she's been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. So take that for what it is. I think that's beautiful. Anything else that comes to mind, Lisa, when you think about maybe a piece of advice that you would have loved to give your younger self, right? Like, we don't have a time machine. You don't want to change anything you've been through because it made you who you were. But if you could go back in time and advise yourself some way, some form or fashion to do the business in a certain way, What advice would you give? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, so I want to go back just again to the sort of communication part of it. So
Please.
one piece of advice that I think is super important is that, we now have all of these ways of communicating with the client, right? We can call, we can text, we can email, and by the way, we still can meet with humans.
Yes.
So
Bizarre.
not on Zoom.
Yes.
So I think what's really been very important and different, my style from a lot of people's style, is I take each client separately. And I have a client now who's in his early 80s, and I needed to talk to him about his property. He doesn't live in New York City. So I got in my car and I drove to where he lives, and I sat with him and his wife, because I realized that somebody of that generation needed to have me in front of them. Maybe I could have done something over the phone, but I still think that it was more meaningful for me to be sitting in front of the person.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of the younger generation, and just the way we work now, we're all doing a thousand things at one time. Everybody thinks that a text is good enough. I really do think it's very important to understand who your client is, whether it's a seller or buyer, and figure out how they like to be communicated with, and meet them on their communication level. And one of the things that I always say when I'm taking on a listing is I say to the client, how do you like to be communicated with? How do you like to be contacted? Do you want me to do 2 or 3 of these? Do you want me to just do 1 of these? So I think that's really important. That's some advice I would give. Some advice I would give that I wish that I had understood better, and maybe this is just with years of experience, is that buying or selling properties, it's often the person's primary home. They've often lived there for a very long time, or they're going to live there for a very long time. People get emotional about it. While it is business, people do get emotional. And I think it's very important as the real estate professional to understand that the person's emotional, but also not to take it personally. So when somebody is maybe not as nice to you as you think they should be, or acting in a certain way because they've gotten emotional about the transaction, you have to be able to take a step back, understand where they're coming from. Not to say that you should take some kind of verbal abuse from somebody, but you should understand that this can be emotional, and you should be ready to speak to the person about the fact that you understand that it's a trying time, that it's a difficult time and an emotional time, and that you're here to take care of them. So to me, that was probably one of the more difficult things to understand as I sort of got busier over time, was being able to remain calm and not take it personally, yet be able to be a person to the client.
And that's massive advice, Lisa, because again, the amount of transactions that you have done over your career thus far and continue to do is massive. So you look at it from that standpoint, and some professionals can get, numbed to certain degrees, right? I mean, doing this for a period of time, any occupation or position, right? But to that individual going through that's their life. That's their transaction, right? It's not the multitudes that one individual's working with. So I think humanizing, and that piece of advice is always being what it's about. This is a people business. The whole world revolves around the communication aspect. And I love the fact that you take the time to go face to face, even though there's so many different tools that are out there that you can communicate and have cadence and pacing to that, to really identify the highest and best uses of time. To me, it's really connecting in a meaningful way, building those long-lasting relationships, and then doing right by people. All the things that you're mentioning and more, I think is a beautiful example. But that's what's so wonderful about this show, is everyone comes from a different place, and everyone has a different walk of life and perspective on how to do business and what really stands out to them. And there's not a one size fits all. So this isn't for anybody to take it personally. If you don't conduct yourself the way that Lisa does, you should. But if you don't, it's okay. We're all different, and that's a good thing. So Lisa, anything that you want to leave the audience with? This has been incredible. Again, getting to know you, getting to know deep pieces of advice out to there. But I always want to leave it with any closing remarks that you may have. I know you have a hard stop here, so I want to respect your time into that. Anything you want to close with?
Yeah, so I think what I want to close with is a positive note about the business. So I was at this event last night, like I said, for the Hollywood Reporter. And a few of the colleagues, I said, how are you doing? People I know from the business, they said, oh, well, not good. I wish the market was better.
Mm.
And my response was, you know, markets are markets go up and down. You can't expect anything that you do to always be good. It just is not like that.
Mhm.
And then in general, those of us at that event in New York have had a good career and we've had plenty of really good years,
Mhm.
and things will get good again. And so you should be, grateful for the good times that you have. And it's a sales business. So in order to do well in this business, I really do believe you have to stay positive. That is a very important part of it. We have to be cheerleaders for our industry. And I think that making sure that you get out of your own way and out of your own box sometimes really helps. I read the paper every day. Obviously, it can be depressing, it can be a lot of things, but it also reminds you of how lucky we are to live in this country. And those of us who are real estate brokers are lucky to be in an industry where we get to work with people. We get to leave our homes. We're not, working virtually, never seeing other people. I think those are all really fun things that we get to do. We get to see different real estate. We get to make friends along the way. And that would be one part of it. And then the other part I would say for people starting off, which I think is super important, is that don't always look for the big heavy hits. No one starts off with the heavy hits. You have to work your way up. And if you would look at a graph of my business from 1997 to 2024, it has been a slow and steady uphill, or I would say graph going up in terms of price point.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody just starts with the big stuff. And if you are too focused on that, you're going to miss all of the business before you, and you may never get to the big stuff. So I think it's really important for people to be patient. I still take on lower price properties, especially if I think that the client is an interesting, kind person. And so I think that would be my last piece of advice for those people starting out.
Oh, Lisa, this is just gold nugget after gold nugget. And again, when you talk about mindset and the importance of an attitude of gratitude, despite what's happening into the world, into the market, is crucial for anyone to have high levels of success. And then I think it to the standpoint of really basing it off of putting in the work and that patience is a virtue. I know that's not necessarily spoken to often anymore, but I think it's very important for all of us to know Rome wasn't built in a day. The reputation that we have wasn't built overnight, right? The book of business, the individuals that we have in contact. So learning to kind of appreciate the journey and every level and step. And you having children, I'm a newer father. I have a 6-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. And
Wonderful.
for me, I'm learning to appreciate every step along the way, the good, the bad, the ugly, because it's not coming back. And I think that that's a beautiful takeaway for everybody to just leave this with, Lisa. This has been an incredible episode. I can't thank you enough for taking the time. It's been an absolute pleasure for sure.
Thanks for reaching out. Hope to see you again sometime.
Lisa, it was an honor on my end, 100%. Can't thank you enough. I do want to thank everybody out there for tuning in, as always, for your time and attention, your love and support. If you like what we're doing with Real Estate Titans, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on the channels. You know what the biz is. I do want to encourage everybody to follow Lisa as well. So jump on social media platforms, check out the website. We'll have links in the show notes down below. If you like what Lisa's saying, reach out, follow, learn from one of the best and brightest. I can't stress enough. I do have to give our sponsor a quick shout out, Lion Bolt Media. If you are a real estate professional looking to grow and scale your business with leading edge digital marketing, visit lionboltmedia.com for more information. Now, we're live here on Real Estate Titans every Tuesday afternoon, a different Titan, a different location. We'll catch you on the next live episode of Real Estate Titans. Take care. Thanks, Lisa.
Bye.